The room fell silent the moment the whisper left the CEO's lips. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it was cold. The kind of quiet threat that could end a career in a single breath. Peek again and you're fired. The words floated through the glass-walled conference room like a blade slicing through air. Across the long, polished table, a man in a worn gray jacket slowly lifted the corner of his mouth into a faint smirk and calmly replied, "I'm blind." And just like that, the room changed. What nobody in that building realized at that moment was that this simple sentence would unravel a story of pain, courage, sacrifice, and a truth powerful enough to change every life inside that towering company. Before we begin this unforgettable journey, take a second right now. If you believe the world still needs kindness, second chances, and compassion, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts around the world. The man sitting at the end of the table was Daniel Carter, a quiet employee in the logistics department of one of the most powerful corporations in the city, Grantwell Industries. The building itself stood like a monument of ambition in the center of downtown Chicago, its mirrored windows reflecting the restless movement of the city. Inside, thousands of employees rushed through hallways every day, chasing deadlines, promotions, and recognition. But Daniel Carter was invisible to most of them. Daniel was 38 years old, tall but slightly hunched from years of physical labor. His dark hair had begun to gray far earlier than most men his age, and faint lines had already carved themselves into the corners of his eyes. Life had not been gentle with him. Every morning before sunrise he woke in a small apartment on the edge of the city where he lived with the most important person in his life, his 7-year-old daughter, Lily Carter. Lily was sunshine in human form. Her laughter filled the tiny apartment with warmth that no expensive mansion could ever buy. She had curly brown hair that bounced when she ran, and a habit of asking questions about everything in the universe. But Lily also carried a quiet shadow in her life. 3 years earlier, her mother, Emily Carter, had passed away after a sudden illness that moved faster than anyone could understand. Daniel had watched helplessly as hospital machines slowly fell silent, leaving him alone with a small child and a mountain of grief. From that moment on, Daniel's life became a daily balancing act between fatherhood and survival. He cooked breakfast, braided Lily's hair before school, even though he never learned properly, packed her lunch with little handwritten notes, and worked long hours to keep their life stable. Sleep became a luxury he rarely enjoyed, but he never complained, because every night when Lily hugged him and whispered, "Good night, Daddy," the exhaustion disappeared for a moment. There was something else about Daniel that few people noticed. His eyes rarely focused on faces. Instead, they hovered somewhere slightly to the side. Many people assumed he was shy, distracted, or simply odd, but the truth was more complicated. Daniel Carter had been losing his sight slowly for years. It started as blurred edges and dim lighting. Doctors had called it a degenerative retinal condition, the kind that didn't destroy vision overnight, but slowly dimmed the world like a fading sunset. Daniel could still see shapes and movement, but details were becoming harder to recognize. Faces blended together. Words on screens required intense concentration. Bright lights burned his eyes. Yet Daniel refused to stop working, not because he loved the job, because Lily needed him. Grantwell Industries was led by a man named Richard Grant, a CEO whose reputation traveled faster than his footsteps. Richard Grant was known throughout the corporate world as a ruthless perfectionist. He believed mistakes were signs of weakness, and compassion was an unnecessary distraction. Employees respected him, but many feared him even more. His presence in a room could freeze conversations instantly. That morning, the company was hosting an important internal meeting about a new logistics system that could save millions of dollars. Managers from different departments had gathered around the long table, presenting reports and strategies. Daniel had been asked to assist by organizing shipment records. It was a small role. He sat quietly, listening carefully, trying to follow the fast-paced discussion while discreetly leaning closer to the papers in front of him. At one point, the presentation slides changed quickly, displaying a chart that Daniel struggled to see clearly. Without thinking, he leaned forward slightly, squinting to catch the numbers. That was when Richard Grant noticed. The CEO leaned back in his chair, his eyes sharp and suspicious. He watched Daniel for several seconds, interpreting the movement as someone trying to spy on confidential data that wasn't meant for lower-level employees. Then came the whisper. "Peek again and you're fired." The entire room stiffened. All eyes shifted toward Daniel, and Daniel Carter calmly smirked. "I'm blind." The silence afterward felt heavier than thunder. Some executives exchanged confused looks. Others assumed it was a joke or an excuse. But Richard Grant didn't laugh. His gaze narrowed. The meeting ended shortly afterward, but the words lingered in the air, like a mystery waiting to be uncovered. Later that afternoon, Human Resources quietly reviewed Daniel's employment records. That's when the truth began to emerge. Medical reports, accommodation requests that had never been processed, emails Daniel had sent months earlier asking for screen reading software that were ignored during a department restructuring. Richard Grant received the file that evening. For the first time in years, the powerful CEO sat alone in his office, staring at a document that made him uncomfortable. Because Daniel Carter had never asked for sympathy. He had only asked for the chance to keep working. The next morning, Richard arrived at the office earlier than usual. Instead of heading to the executive floor, he walked through the logistics department where Daniel worked. What he saw surprised him. Daniel was carefully labeling packages using large printed markers so he could read them. He counted steps between storage racks to navigate without bumping into obstacles. Every movement required patience and focus. But the most striking moment came when Daniel pulled out his phone during lunch break. A small video call appeared. Lily's smiling face filled the screen. Richard couldn't hear the full conversation, but he watched the father's expression soften instantly. Daniel's exhaustion melted into warmth as he listened to his daughter excitedly describe her day at school. It was the kind of love no corporate title could buy, and something inside Richard Grant shifted that day. Over the following weeks, subtle changes began to appear throughout the company. Accessibility software was installed, workspaces were redesigned, employees were encouraged to report overlooked struggles. Daniel didn't know the full reason behind these sudden improvements, but he noticed something else too. Richard Grant occasionally walked through the logistics floor, and every time their paths crossed, the CEO nodded respectfully. Months later, during a company gathering celebrating the success of the new logistics system, Richard Grant stepped onto the stage. He looked out at hundreds of employees. Then he spoke about leadership, resilience, and the unseen battles people carry into work every day. Without mentioning names, he told the story of a man who refused to give up despite losing his sight, raising a child alone, and working twice as hard as anyone else just to keep moving forward. The room slowly realized who he was talking about. Daniel Carter sat quietly in the back row, holding Lily's small hand. And for the first time since Emily passed away, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Recognition, respect, and hope. Before we reach the final moments of this story, we want to ask something special. If you have ever faced a struggle that people around you didn't understand, write the word strength in the comments right now. Let others know they are not alone. Years later, Grantwell Industries would be known not just for its profits, but for its humanity. And the moment that changed everything, a quiet whisper, a fearless smirk, and a blind single father who refused to stop seeing the future his daughter deserved. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel so more people can hear stories that remind us what truly matters. Because sometimes the strongest people in the room are the ones quietly fighting battles we cannot see.